Scotland's proposals to make it easier for people to legally change their own gender are causing concern. A study by Professor Sarah Pedersen reveals women from across the political spectrum are collaborating to oppose the plans.
They might have started off, as so many people do, sort of from a liberal with a small L point of view of, oh yes, this is wonderful. I would support any sort of support for this group. But then when they actually investigated what it might mean for women and girls' sex-based rights, they became more concerned. As they spoke to others, particularly on social media, and discussed and debated and shared information, their concerns grew. And so now they are getting together in all these small grassroots organisations, for Women's Scotland, Frontline Feminists Scotland, and small groups in towns and cities throughout Scotland. And they're starting, well, they aren't starting, but they have been campaigning for some time now to try and raise awareness with the public in order to impact on policymakers and politicians.
And so what are those main concerns that the women have?
They are concerned about how, if self-identification is introduced, in other words, that a man could say he was a woman or a woman can say that they are a man without having a doctor's certificate or being examined by a psychologist or anything like that. If it's just self-identification of gender, they are concerned not about sort of the genuine trans person, but they're concerned about somebody who might use this for their own purposes. And in particular, they're concerned about access to women's refuges, women's prisons, and women's sport.
Pedersen says the women she interviewed for the study wanted to remain anonymous. Some faced abuse or lost their income after posting their views on social media. Others had even received threats of rape and death threats. The Scottish Government says it wants to change the law because the current process is too difficult and causes distress. The proposals include allowing a legal change of gender without medical diagnosis of gender dysphoria and reducing the required time to live as the new gender from 2 years to 3 months. The charity Children in Scotland want the law to allow 16 or 17-year-olds to change their gender, describing the process of applying for a gender recognition certificate as a gruelling endeavour. They didn't respond to a request for an interview. Sociologist Frank Furedi says the issue introduces another layer of confusion for children when they are trying to work themselves out.
What's very interesting, I was talking to a couple of mothers in one of the local schools, and they were saying, well, one day they realized that this friendship network has all decided to change their identity in that kind of fundamental way. And then one by one, 2 or 3 months later, decided that I'm not really sure if that's what I really am. But to me, the importance of this story is that the confusion that it creates detaches and dispossesses young children from the confidence that their initial identity has given them, without offering them something new that could, in a sense, help them to find their place in this world.
Holyrood ministers have been accused of only consulting those who are supportive of the reforms. And at the end of January, the UK's equality watchdog wrote to the Scottish Government saying it should pause its plans. A recent poll of around 2,000 Scottish people, though, shows that public opinion is mixed. Polling expert Sir John Curtis says that it's an issue that doesn't necessarily follow party lines for voters.
How crucial do you think this topic is for people when, they go to vote in the local elections?
I think the honest truth is probably not that important for most people. Now, clearly for people who have changed their gender or thinking of changing their gender, this might be a pretty important issue. And there are a few people on the other side of the argument who've taken quite a strong position, saying that some of these changes, in their view, threaten the position of women. On the latter, however, it is therefore rather interesting that actually, for example, on the question of whether or not trans women should be allowed to use women's toilets, women are more inclined to be in favour of that proposition than are men. So not as all as it seems from some of the public debate. But the other thing that we learn from this is that only around a third of people saying they've been following the debate about the Gender Recognition Act at all closely. And given also the fact that quite a lot of people express uncertainty about this, and there are very few propositions in this poll where more than half of people take one side or the other.
The issue of gender is a devolved matter, so Westminster would decide on any changes in law for England and Wales. MPs debated the reforms on Monday afternoon, with one MP saying she had received death threats for expressing her view. Some MPs called for the reforms in England and Wales, while others argued not to allow self-identification of legal sex. The Scottish Parliament is expected to consider their reforms before the summer. Jane Worrell, NTD News.